Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's final webinar in this series between Meteor and Silver Lining. We are talking today about how to lead meetings without losing your mind. I am Mimi and Alexandra. Hello, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you, Mimi?
I am doing well.
So summery. What is the weather like there? It looks gorgeous.
It's beautiful. It's actually quite hot today. We were sitting outside at lunch with my team and someone said, I feel like I'm on vacation in Mexico right now. Like it's hot. I feel like I need a mojito in my hand. It'd be so nice.
Nice. Sounds awesome. We had beautiful weather. I'm in Toronto. We had beautiful weather over the weekend, record-setting highs. And now we've gone back to rain. You know what? Every single week we've had this seminar, it's rained on a Tuesday in Toronto. I know. It's cold here.
Such a bummer.
Oh, we've got more people joining.
Awesome.
Great.
So if you have just joined us, hop over to the chat box, tell us who you are and where you're calling in from. Make sure that it says to everyone when you're typing in. I'm going to actually just send a message in the chat. So if you look to see, there should be like a little flashing guide by your chat area. It's on the bottom of the screen. I'll show you a little bit later exactly where it is, but this will at least help get us going to see where everyone's calling in from. So other people from New York. That's where I am. I'm in Brooklyn. A Dr. Tamara Tweel. Hi, Tamara, also in New York. Fantastic. So welcome to everybody. We're going to wait just another minute before we get started so we have a chance for everybody to hop online. I know it's hard running from meeting to meeting, getting into everything, getting up on the platform and everything. Another thing you can share with us if you're just joining is this your first time joining us on this webinar series? Have you been to all 3 webinars? Have you been to one of the other ones? It's helpful for me also just to know how many people who are here have already heard a lot of what I've been talking about and how much of this is going to be totally new for you. So while we're just waiting one more minute, Dara from Ohio, fantastic, welcome.
Ohio, where is Corinne?
There we go, Corinne from Minnesota, into all 3. Coupled into all 3. Nice job, everybody. You're really dedicated to effective meetings. That makes me so happy.
Has anyone implemented anything that they've learned so far into their meetings last week or the week previous?
So while we're waiting for everyone to respond, I think I'm gonna pull up my slides and get everything all set up. And then, Alexandra, you're gonna start with an intro again, correct?
Yeah, I think we'll just for, we have a few people on who are currently clients of Silver Lining and a few people on who are new to the Silver Lining community. So for the sake of everybody, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Alexandra Hill and I'm the Director of SLAP Happiness here at Silver Lining. And I thought it actually might be a little fun today for everyone, whether you're in our community or not, just to hear a little bit about our fearless leader and founder, Carissa Reiniger, and a little bit about her story because it's a pretty fantastic one. She started this company, Silver Lining, in 2005, and she created the Silver Lining Action Plan, or what she called a SLAP, which is a methodology that has helped over 10,000 small business owners in 9 countries so far to set and to hit their growth goals. She's pretty amazing. She's worked with some major organizations. Those include Google, the White House, Hewlett-Packard, Intuit, CitiCard, Staples, Citrix, American Airlines. And she and her work have been featured in places such as, the New York Times and the National Post, and over here in Canada, the Globe and Mail, Inc. magazine, Entrepreneur magazine, Forbes, and the list kind of goes on and on and on. And she truly is on a mission to help more small business owners to make more money doing what they love, because she truly believes that we can change the economy one small business at a time. And everyone who works in the Silver Lining community, most of us have been small business owners ourselves, and we work in this company because we're very passionate about small businesses and helping them to grow. And so I'll tell you just a little bit about what a SLAP is for those on the call who don't know. A SLAP is a Silver Lining action plan. And what it does, it helps you set revenue and profit goals and to create a really, really direct action plan to hit those goals. So it's not a consulting program. It's, you know, it's not like an impractical business plan that you you create and you never look at. Instead, really, it's a very active plan that helps you, that you build out a one-year plan that is tied to a one-year growth goal, and it's very action-oriented. So being in the silver lining community really helps you to identify your niche and grow faster, evaluate your expenses, your profit margins, best pricing for your products or your services. You know, we help you identify your ideal client and where to easily find them without spending, you know, a lot of money and very limited time. Understanding, you know, the various marketing strategies. We at Silver Lining have 9 marketing strategies, or what we call connecting strategies, that you can use to help you successfully grow your business. We teach you how to learn to say no, which is such an important thing. We just don't have enough time in the day. How to say no to the things that, you know, that maybe you want to do, but really aren't helping you to reach those goals. We also help make sure that the actions that you're taking every day are really in line with the results that you want and deserve. And really the most important part of our program is the accountability piece. So we offer support on a weekly or monthly basis that's tied into the plan and the goals that you have, to make sure that you're actually hitting those goals and you're able to talk with someone about the challenges you're facing or the successes that you're having, and to ideate continually with a business expert who can continually help you to grow your business and keep you on track. So that's a little bit about Silver Lining and, you know, how we came to be and who we are. Today I'm super excited. I've been in a bunch of meetings today, and the topic today is how to lead meetings without losing your mind. So I love the title. I'm excited for today's webinar. Joining us again today, obviously, for the third and final webinar in the series is Mimi Camford-Stewart, and she's the founder and CEO of Meteor. So welcome, Mimi, and look forward to hearing what you have to say today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I know this is our last webinar, which makes me a little bit sad, but also kind of exciting because it means that everyone has kind of gotten what I consider to be the core fundamentals of having effective meetings. So if you've missed the first 2 webinars, you should definitely check out the recordings. We have those available if you don't have them already. So just let us know. But I'm super excited to get this show on the road here. So I just want to make sure that if you have joined us since we got started, that you know how to type into the chat box. I really want to answer your questions as we're going, because I think this topic in particular can be one that is really hard when you're trying to lead a meeting and there's so many things going on. So if you have questions as we're going, click the little chat box and make sure it says to everyone so that we can all see your questions, which is really helpful, so I don't have to always repeat them. And also, if I don't get to them as we're going along, we'll definitely address them at the end. So you just heard about Silver Lining. So I'm just going to say a few words about Meteor. So we are a consulting, technology, professional development firm. We do a lot of different things. They fall into these 3 buckets typically. We have our web and mobile apps, which I'm going to show you a little bit of those at the end. It's our technology tool to help you implement all the practices that we talk about on this webinar and in other spaces. We offer skill building resources like these webinars and workshops and things. Our blog, check that out online as well. We send really accessible articles on how to collaborate effectively, how to run meetings, etc. Once a week. We don't overload you, we promise. And we have our new Thriving Teams program, which it's great that we just heard about Carissa, because she's actually the part of the inspiration to develop this Thriving Teams program. So what Carissa did for small businesses, we want to do for teams. So we want to be a program that really helps your team become a thriving team. So we work with you over the course of 12 months, going through our curriculum. We hold you accountable. We help your entire team develop the skills and the capabilities to create a team in which there's balance, common and shared purpose, clear and effective communication, shared accountability, trust, shared practices and norms, that you are really change able, so that as things evolve in your work, you can adapt quickly and keep up your momentum, and that ultimately people on your team feel really meaningfully engaged. So we take the practices, for example, with meetings like we're talking about here, and we've embedded them into this program so that we can make sure that your team learns these practices and then applies them into your everyday work so that you can really activate all of those best practices. So that's what our Thriving Teams program is. Again, Carissa was one of the inspirations behind it, because the way that she's developed Silver Lining and the action plan and the whole year-long process made so much sense that if we can do this for a business, we can do this for a team. So I'm happy to tell you more about that. And actually, we have a special offer for anyone who's on the webinar today. So make sure you follow up with us afterwards to take advantage of that. So again, I'm Amy. I'm the founder and CEO of Meteor, and I will be leading us through today's conversation. And I just realized that my chat box disappeared, so I want to make sure I pull that back up. All right, there we go. Much better. So for today, we have 3 learning objectives. The first is how to juggle multiple roles, because we all know, if we've been there before, it's really hard to engage people, keep the agenda on track, take notes, and do all those things that you need to do to make sure the meeting is successful. So we'll talk about how to do that, how to juggle those roles, how to take effective notes so that at the end you've really crystallized your meeting outcomes. And then lastly, how to wrap up so that when at the end of the meeting people feel that you've succeeded, that they have a sense of closure, and that the outcomes are really clear and everyone's aligned. Just pulling up my notes and making sure I didn't miss anything. Oh yes, and of course, we're going to show you the Meteor software at the end too, and how our software helps you do these different components to leading an effective meeting. Oh, there we go, slides. Okay, so I love this. Leadership is a series of behaviors rather than a role for heroes. This was said by Margaret Wheatley, who's a management guru. And there are definitely times where I feel like I'm trying to be a hero in leading this meeting. Like, there's so many people and moving pieces, and some people are virtual and some people are in the room. And it can feel like it takes heroics to really get through it. But that's not how it should be, right? It really is about having the tips, approaches, behaviors to lead that meeting so that anyone can do it. It just takes some practice. It takes some intention. Like, you really do have to be very present, but it's not craziness and it's not heroics. Now, when you're leading a meeting, clearly you've got a lot on your mind, right? You're trying to facilitate participation. You want to make sure that the conversation's flowing. You want there to be a balance of voices. You want to create an atmosphere in which people feel like they can contribute to their best thinking, they can push back, they can question, right? There's that engagement piece of the meeting. You want it to be an enjoyable and fun and balanced meeting, but you also want to stay on track, right? You got to keep the conversation on topic. You have to stay within your time constraints. You want to get to that desired outcome. So there's a lot of kind of managing the conversation to get there, in addition to managing the people in that conversation. And then, of course, you also need to take notes. You want to make sure that the takeaways are captured, that it's really clear what those next steps are, tasks, decisions, learnings, so that the people in the meeting are really clear, but also so that the people who were not in the meeting know exactly what they need to know coming out of the meeting. So this is a lot of stuff to do when it's just you. So we're going to talk about 5 different tips that you can apply right now to make sure that you can lead your meetings without heroics and without losing your mind. So tip number 1 is to plan a thoughtful agenda. Now you might be thinking, wait, that was what we talked about at the last meeting. Exactly. You have to have your roadmap to guide the meeting. If you don't have your roadmap, you're going to be doing heroics of all sorts. First of all, you're probably not even going to have an effective meeting to be able to really lead successfully because you don't know what the roadmap is. So first thing is absolutely to plan that agenda. If you missed our previous webinar, make sure you watch it. It's all about what is a thoughtful agenda. So from a very high level, you want to make sure that you know what is the desired outcome of this meeting and have that written down. What are the activities you're going to do and how much time are you allocating to each one? And then lastly, what are some of the questions you're going to ask to create that engagement and to get the conversation going, and what are the questions you want answered so that you'll know when that topic is come to close. Now, you want to make sure that your agenda, after it's created, is visible to you. I like to print mine out or have it on my phone so that I can see it clearly, even if the slides that I'm showing are changing. So however you make it visible, whether it's being projected or written out or in your notebook, you want to make sure that you can see it and you can always refer back to it regardless of what else is happening on the screen. When it comes to writing down the times for each of the agenda items, I like writing down the time, like when I'm looking at my phone or my watch, what time it will be when I get through the end of that topic. So from a meeting starting at 1 o'clock, my check-in will be from 1 to 1:05. The next topic would be from 1:05 to 1:12, right? There's no reason it has to be in 5-minute increments. Figure out how long you need and then take that amount of time. Could be 6 minutes, could be 9 minutes, that's fine. But again, write it as like 1 o'clock to 1:07, 1:07 to 1:12. That way, when you're trying to kind of balance and go back and forth between your agenda and your watch or your phone, you're not having to do the mental gymnastics of, okay, it's 1:22 right now, and I said we're going to have 15 minutes for this time, so that means I have until 1:26, which means that we have 4 more minutes left. That's like way too much. Right? You're already overloaded trying to leave this meeting. So make it easy for yourself so you can quickly just look and see, oh, it's 1:22, I have until 1:26, I have a few more minutes to keep going. If you have any questions, again, pop them into the question box on the chat and I will touch on them. All right, now we're gonna move on to tip number 2. Establish shared norms. So norms are ground rules that set expectation for behavior. Now, it can be really hard to navigate and kind of get people engaged when you want the quieter people to speak up, you want the louder people to be quiet, you might want someone to play devil's advocate and really push back on ideas, but that's not really the culture you've established in your organization. Maybe you want people to not be so judgy of different ideas, you want there to be a more open, welcoming format for ideas to be shared. Maybe it's that you want people to stop using their phones. Whatever it is, norms often are a good solution to help with creating shared behaviors that you want to happen in your meetings. Now, we include norms in our agenda. It's not something I showed last time or talked about when planning and designing an effective meeting, but it is something that you can add to your agenda so that people know even before the meeting what the norms are. A quick story, so one of our customers at Meteor started using our software and there were norms in there and they were like, what are norms? We don't even know what these are. They did a little learning around them. And then later we were interviewing them for a customer story and they said, and I want to actually read their quotes. It's like they were written for every problem we had, but maybe weren't even aware of. We could call on the norms when people were talking out of turn or having side conversations. They basically said that norms changed how they run their meetings because suddenly they had some shared expectations that everyone could align to and people could now hold each other accountable to these shared behaviors. So norms are a little bit weird if you've never used them before. So let's just kind of dig into them a little bit more. Norms can be for all kinds of things. It can be for communication, participation, decision-making, treating each other with respect, how we use technology, what happens if someone shows up late, what happens if someone leaves early, what about confidentiality. Norms can be written to address almost any aspect of the human behavior that happens in or around the meeting. What you want is your norms to reflect the values of your team and the kind of environment that you want to create for everyone. So when you have your norms, and we'll look at them in detail in a minute, there are a couple things that you want to do. So I already mentioned you can share them ahead of time in your agenda. You can also review them at the start of the meeting. So even if you haven't sent them ahead of time, or even if you have, share them at the beginning to get everybody aligned to say, these are the norms for this meeting. Any questions? Does everyone agree to these? Do we want to make any modifications or additions? Get people to verbally or physically kind of say, yes, I'm on board with that. That's a huge step towards getting people to actually act in the ways that you want. The second is to make them visible. So write them on the wall, share them on the screen, put them somewhere where your eye will catch them for two reasons. One, it's just a good reminder when you see them to check everyone's behavior. Are people following these norms? Is there anything I need to point out? And secondly, it's helpful when you do call somebody out on a norm to be able to point to the wall and say, hey, norm number 2, we said X, Y, and Z, and I'm noticing that what you're doing doesn't follow that, right? So it gives you that kind of thing that you can point to say, I'm not the bad guy for asking you to stop. We have a norm that you agreed to that asks you to stop. So for example, if you want quieter people to speak up and louder people to be quiet, you might have a norm that says, you know, to check how much you're sharing. If you haven't shared, speak up. If you've shared a lot, quiet yourself down and listen. So if I want someone to be quiet because they've taken over the conversation, we know that this happens with some people who just talk and talk and talk. I know I am definitely guilty of that sometimes. I'm definitely an external thinker, so I talk to think. It's really helpful to be able to say, maybe we've heard a lot from you today, and since our norm is that for people to step forward who haven't spoken, or for people who've spoken to take a step back, let's make some space for other people. So now I, as the meeting leader, am not the rude one saying, Mimi, you talk too much, shut up. But I'm the person who's saying, we have a norm that we've agreed to, so Mimi, can you please follow the norm that we've established? So again, it's helpful when they're visible on the wall so you can point to them and refer to them. All right, so now let's look at what some actual norms are. So for today, these norms that I've selected are ones that are going to help you lead the meeting without losing your mind, right? So they're all really process norms that are going to help you manage the conversation. So let's talk through each one of these because they're all, they all can be used in specific ways. So number 1 is to use a back burner to capture off-agenda topics. So a back burner is probably the best way to keep your conversation on track. When a conversation starts to wander, you go off on a tangent, you know, you're basically just like, wow, this is not relevant to this meeting anymore. We're no longer talking about what we need to be talking about. The back burner is a way for you to say, hey guys, let's put this item, this topic, this conversation on the back burner for another time, and let's get back to what we need to be talking about for today, why we're here, get back to our agenda. It's much easier to do that than to shut somebody down and just say, like, you've taken us off track. Like, we need to get this meeting back on track. You want the person to feel heard, like, oh, this topic is actually important to them. So, and it's a conversation that maybe does need to happen. Not always. Sometimes there are conversations that are just side conversations that aren't important, but it might be something that actually does need to be followed up on. So by putting it in the back burner, you've acknowledged that this topic is important. You've put it somewhere in your meeting notes or potentially on the wall, on the whiteboard or somewhere where they can see that it's been captured and they feel like, okay, it's not going to get forgotten. I feel heard. I can move on now. I'm not going to hold on to that. The back burner should then be like, you should do something with it. Some people are perfectly fine saying, you know, actually all those back burner items at the end of the meeting, we don't really need to do anything with them. Maybe it's an issue that got resolved. Maybe it's you know, no longer relevant. Maybe it was just an idea that doesn't have to go anywhere. But maybe it's something that actually does need to be followed up on. So you can assign someone to be responsible for that back burner item and make sure that that item gets put onto the next meeting agenda or gets a meeting scheduled about it, whatever needs to happen, that it actually goes somewhere. All right, number 2, pay attention to time constraints. So time is always of the essence, right? Time is one of the hardest things to manage when you're trying to do all of these different things in your meeting. So there are a couple things that you can do when you have a norm. So one, sometimes when you have a norm, just telling everybody, hey, we're all responsible for paying attention to the time, that's enough to get everybody to think about how long they're talking. Or if you start your meeting by saying, we don't have a lot of time today, I want to make sure we get through our agenda. So let's everyone pay attention to time constraints, keep your remarks short, right? That sometimes is enough, but not always. So if you find that you're running out of time on a topic, you've allocated 10 minutes, it's now been 8, and you realize, wow, this topic could go on and on and on. There's no natural end, right? There's not like we're making a decision. It's just kind of open conversation around a topic. Maybe we're brainstorming, maybe we're just kind of talking and through processing or creating some alignments. Those are the moments where you want to now use your norms to direct the conversation to closure so you can keep going. So a couple things that you can say are something like, I see that we're running out of time for this topic. Does anyone have anything new to add? Right? Given our norm around time constraints, does anyone have anything new to add? Otherwise, let's move on from this topic. Or does anyone who hasn't shared anything yet have something that they want to say? Right? Let's make space for people who haven't spoken, but if you've already shared, this is not the time for you to continue. So you can use your norms around time constraints to get the people who've already spoken to be a little bit quieter and just make some space for the new voices. Lastly, you could also say something like, I know we could continue on this topic, and I'm sure there's a lot more interesting points to be made, but given that we have a time constraint and we've committed to keeping this meeting on time, is it okay if we move on? And we can always pick this conversation up another time if needed. So give yourself that leeway to say, we have time constraints, we've all acknowledged that, now let's keep the conversation going. All right, third norm, only one conversation at a time. In some meetings, this is not a problem. Everybody stays focused. And in other meetings, you end up finding that you've got two people kind of on the side going like this and talking on the side. And then you're like, wait a second, where'd everybody go? I need everyone to be in one conversation. So establish from the beginning, we have a norm, one conversation at a time, no side conversations. They're unproductive, they're frustrating, and frankly, when I'm leading a meeting, I find it extremely rude when people are having side conversations. Right? It's really frustrating. And it's even more frustrating when there are people who are remote and they're conference call in and they don't even know what's going on and suddenly they just hear a lot of noise on the phone. Really, really, really bad. So get everybody on the same page, one conversation at a time. And then if you notice a conversation happening, again, point to the norms and you can say, hey guys, I want to bring you back to the conversation. We have a norm about one conversation at a time, or we have a norm of no side talk. So please, like, if it's something to share with the group, please do. Otherwise, you can talk about that later, right? But use the norm as the bad guy so that you don't have to be the bad guy. All right, number four we're at, put away phones and other non-essential devices. Phones can be really distracting during meetings. So if you set up your norm, when people walk in the door, they know, and you start by saying, in this meeting, we're not gonna have our phones out. Please put them aside. If you have an emergency and you need your phone, of course, like you can keep it out. Your kid's sick and you have the babysitter who can call you, or you're waiting for a really important client call, or a call from the lawyer about something and you don't know when they're calling. Sure, great, you have a reason. That's now an essential device you need to have available. Or if you're taking notes on your computer, you can have your computer out. But otherwise, you can just say any of the devices, please put them aside so that we can all be engaged. And then when you see someone, maybe like sneaking a peek at their phone, just kind of point it out and just say like, I promise you there'll be time later for you checking your phone. Please stay with us. We have our norm about no phones. Please stay with us in our conversation. All right, anyone can call it. So I love this one because it's really kind of open-ended when you say anyone can call it. But what I mean by it is that anyone can call anything. So anyone can point out that a norm is being broken. Anyone can call that we've reached a conclusion on a decision. Anyone can call that they feel like our conversation's gone off track. Whatever you want that it to be, the group is just saying like, we're all taking responsibility for making sure that this meeting is successful and that we're moving forward. Not every team feels like that's true. Like a lot of times people feel like the meeting leader has to do everything. So making a norm that says we're all responsible for this and anyone can call it is one way to get everyone to be bought in and help take the load off of you. All right, the very last one for today, at least, is stop for clarification. So there are times where it might feel like you're going in circles and you're running out of time and you're not really sure what's happening here and you're trying to move the conversation forward. So stopping for clarification is giving yourself and the team permission to say, let's take a step back and see what's going on here. Do we have some options on the table that we should be considering? Can we narrow some things down? Are we missing information? Am I just not understanding what you're saying? Is that why we're having this back and forth and we seem to be on different pages? Sometimes it's hard to ask for clarification or to take a step back and assess what's happening in your meeting. So when you have a norm that says, no, it's okay to stop for clarification. It's okay to say, time out. Let's take a little assessment as to what's going on here, can really help set you back on the right track. So a couple things that you can say when you notice that maybe things are kind of spinning around in circles, is one, you can offer up your analysis. You can say, like, it seems like we're spinning around. What is it that we need in order to move forward? Are we missing some information? Are we missing a particular person? Or is there something else that's going on here that's stopping us from moving forward? You can also say, like, can somebody else clarify exactly what the options are, right? Or I hear these three things being said. Am I interpreting them correctly? Am I reflecting what I'm hearing correctly? So take that step back, and you can even use it. You can even have a norm instead of saying stop for clarification that says it's okay to take a time out, right? You can use these norms and you can create them however you want. You don't have to use these particular ones. We have articles on norms and we'll share them afterwards, or maybe my colleague can type them into the chat box. So you can write your own norms. You can use norms that we've written. You can find norms online. You just want the norms to be, to create the environment that you want, to be helpful to you in facilitating the conversation, and to feel comfortable for your team. And again, you can even say the word norms is not the right word for you. Maybe you want to call them ground rules, or you want to call them expectations. All of that is okay. You just want to be able to say, this is what we've agreed to do in terms of behaving in this meeting, and have everybody buy into that. Any questions about norms as we move on to tip number 3? Pop them in the chat box. I'm happy to tackle them, because norms is definitely a big, meaty topic. We could do an entire webinar just on norms. So if you're interested in that, you can let me know too. I can plan out a whole webinar just on norms. That would be really fun. Process norms, all kinds of norms. So, seeing no questions at the moment, I'm going to keep going. But again, go ahead and type them in. I won't forget about them. So tip number 3 is empower the group. Share the responsibility and spread the love. Right? You actually, as meeting leader, don't need to do everything. So norms help you. Remember, we had that one, anyone can call it. That's one norm that helps you empower the group. Making sure everybody knows we're all responsible for making sure the norms are employed. We're all responsible for staying on track with the agenda. We're all responsible for checking the time. It's totally okay to share responsibility and empower everyone to be part of the meeting's success. And in fact, it's actually healthy to do that. But in addition to doing that with norms, you can also do that with roles. So a couple of roles that you can consider asking different people to take on. One is to be the technology keeper. Have somebody else be responsible for setting up the technology, calling into the meeting room, whatever it is, to get the technology components set up. That way you can focus on other things like making sure your slides are up, making sure that the people who are coming into the room are welcomed and grabbing their seats. So that's one thing, just take a little bit of pressure off yourself to set up technology. Second is you can actually have someone who's specifically responsible for checking in on the norms. So you can say, this person is going to be our kind of norm supervisor. And I see there's a question, is there an amount of norms that we should shoot for in a particular meeting? So there's no particular amount of norms that you want to have. You want to have norms that make sense for you. I'd say no more than like 3 or 4, because once you get into lists of norms that are like 7 or 8 or 10, and honestly, I have part of one team for another organization that has like 10 norms, and it's just impossible to follow all of them, right? It's too much to remember, and it's really not helpful. So usually, 3 to 5 norms is a healthy amount. You might only need 2 though, or 1, and that's okay. If your only norm is no technology, that's also fine, if that's the norm that your team needs. So empower, again, you can have that one person to say, you're going to be our norm keeper and make sure that we're all checking in on our norms and that we're all following our norms appropriately. A different kind of role you could offer is to have somebody else lead a portion of the meeting or facilitate a portion of the meeting. This is especially good if someone else is the content owner, but not always. You don't have to be the content owner to also facilitate the conversation. So you can ask somebody else to be responsible for making sure that people are engaged and moving the conversation through a decision process, or et cetera. And then lastly, you can ask someone else to help with taking notes. So you can either ask them or assign them to be the official note taker, or you can just say like, hey, when I'm talking, will you make sure that you capture the kind of key points so that I don't have to be talking and writing at the same time. So you can definitely, take some of the pressure off yourself and encourage other people or ask other people to help you manage some of those roles that you're juggling by empowering your team. Now, it's really healthy to do this, not only for your own sanity, but also because it helps to develop the competencies and the skills of the members on your team. Getting other people to be more comfortable with norms, to be paying attention to how people are engaging in conversation, to be listening to the conversation, pulling out the key takeaways to write them in the notes. Those are all skills that people should be developing and refining. And the more you do them, the better you get in your professional setting. So, don't think of it as like, oh, I'm off-putting this, I'm offloading this, and like, oh, being a note taker, it's such an administrative task, I don't want to do that, I don't want to make someone be the note taker. Instead, frame it as, this is a great opportunity for you to develop your professionals. Being able to listen to the conversation, synthesize down what you're hearing into a key takeaway is a great skill that people should be developing. So position it as, you're growing, I'm helping you grow your skills, and you're helping me lead a more effective meeting. And when you rotate the roles also, don't always make the same person the note taker, right? It's not, that's when it starts to feel sometimes like it's an administrative task. So rotate them, ask people to share those roles. In fact, in my team, we rotate the roles, and sometimes it's just who says, I'll do it today. And we actually have people volunteer to take notes. And sometimes we ask somebody, hey, it's been a while since you've taken notes. Would you mind doing it today? All right, we're going to take a quick pause and do a little poll. How does your team capture notes? Because notes are such a big thing, right? We're just talking about them. So here's 5 options. Either we don't have shared notes, we have a designated note taker consistently, I take my own notes, maybe we write notes after a meeting, someone types them up, or something else. So hop over to the chat box and you can answer, you just type in A, B, C, D, or E, and what else you do. Just let us know, how do you typically take notes? And while you're doing that, I'm going to tell you one quick story about one of our customers that I think is really funny, who wanted to introduce norms. So she read our article on introducing norms that I think was shared in the chat box earlier. And she shared it with her boss, and her boss was like, I do not think this is a good idea. Actually, I think this is terrible, but if you want to introduce it to the team, go right ahead. It's your neck on the line when everybody disagrees and thinks this is stupid. So she went out and she printed out the article. She took it to the next meeting. She shared it with everybody, and she said, I think our team could really benefit from having norms. Let's read this article. What do you guys think? And everybody thought it was a great idea, actually. They all wanted to have norms in their meeting, and they decided that at any point in a meeting, if someone wasn't following a norm, anyone in the conversation could raise their hand, and that was a signal to the person who was talking that they weren't following a norm. So before jumping in and correcting them, before saying, maybe you're doing X, Y, and Z wrong, or maybe you're not following a norm, by raising their hand, they were signaling and saying, I see that you're doing something that doesn't follow a norm. And that person could check themselves and say, oh, I see that Ty has her hand up. I wonder if she's telling me that I'm not following a norm. What might I be doing? And can I correct my own behavior? And if the person then wasn't able to correct their own behavior, the person who was like, oh, I noticed you did something, could then help them out by saying, I've noticed that you didn't do X, Y, and Z, or that you're positioning this as, a no but instead of a both and, whatever the norm was that they're not following. I just love that idea of having everyone in the meeting kind of reading the article and agreeing, yeah, let's try norms together. And oh, let's do this hand raising thing, which wasn't our idea, that was their idea, as a way to bring norms in. So just a side note, I see lots of great comments on here. So a lot of B's, that we have a designated note taker, a couple C's, that I take my own notes. Some people are using different technology tools to do that. And yeah, a lot of people that like to take notes by hand. This is very common. And we're actually going to talk about how to manage that at the end. So if you take notes by hand, or you take your own notes in the meeting, but you don't typically have shared notes, we're going to talk about how to address that in a couple of minutes. So just hold that thought. And for those of you who have a designated note taker, you can think about trying to rotate that role so that it doesn't have to be the one same person all the time. But it's great that you have at least somebody who's thinking about having shared notes by having a note taker. So glad to see that. All right, moving us along, I'm going to make sure we get through our last couple of tips here. So tip number 4 is to capture those crystallized notes. So make sure that you write down tasks, decisions, and learnings. Right? You want to capture the message, not the exact words. It's not helpful to have a transcript. Right? What you really want is the key takeaways from the conversation. You want them to be clear and accurate and precise. So you only really need to capture the key takeaways, which in our perspective are tasks, decisions, and learnings. And you can also use your role as the meeting leader or the note taker to help capture these notes and help move the conversation forward. So we'll talk about that for each one. So the first one is tasks, right? Who should do what by when? One of my favorite kind of notorious moments in meetings is when someone says, oh, we should really look into that. You know, like, let's follow up on that. Who is this we? Like, this notorious we gets assigned a lot of next steps in meetings. And if you want anything to get done in a meeting or kind of following out of a meeting, you have to know who is going to do it, what exactly is it that they're going to do, and when should it get done by, right? When lots of ideas get floated in next steps, if they're stated as this, well, we should follow up, or, you know, let's do that thing, no one's really sure if that's actually a next step or if that's just an idea that was floated of something that we should do or we could do. So you want to be really precise about this is exactly the task and this is who's going to do it, right? Because now, even if it is really clear, oh, we need the numbers on that from Bill. We need the financial model from Bill. Okay, well, yeah, we do. That's very clear. This is what we need. But who's going to do that? Even when there's sometimes an obvious person, like, well, maybe sits next to Bill or maybe usually works with Bill, so she should be the one. If I haven't been assigned it or I haven't volunteered to take ownership of it, we can't assume that I'm just going to do it. No, that just doesn't work. People don't generally opt into tasks that they're not assigned, especially in meetings. So be really clear about what that task is and really clear who's going to own it. And then thirdly, when there's no urgency, right? It's like, yeah, maybe you said you agreed you're going to get the numbers from Bill from that new financial model. Great. Okay, but what am I going to do with them and who, like, afterwards? And when does this have to happen? Do I need to bring them back to the team at our next meeting? So my due date's the next meeting. Do I need to share them out tomorrow by email? Like, I don't know. So sure, it's on my to-do list. Yeah, I've agreed to do it, but I'm really busy right now, so I'll just do it later because no one's holding me accountable to this. No one's told me this is a priority that has to get done by this point. So make sure when you capture your tasks that you've got that clear task of next step, who's going to do it and by when. Now, during the meeting, you can, if you think a next step is being identified, you can actually call it out as the meeting leader and say, it sounds like we're coming to some agreement on some next steps here. Did I get this accurately? That Mamie is going to get the numbers from Bill. Okay, great. And when should she get them? So you can just ask and call it out, and it helps bring that conversation to a closure because you're clarifying the next steps from that conversation. If you're not sure what the next steps are, you can just say, okay, so I'm not really sure what the next step is on this. Can someone state for me what they think the next step is, and just put it to the group. You can also just scratch these things down on paper. Like, that's great. You don't have to be typing up whole notes. You don't have to be writing full sentences. Just jot it down on paper if you think you hear a next step, and we'll revisit it again at the end of the meeting. So just capture, like, I think there's a next step about numbers with Bill, and that's also just fine. You don't have to kind of clarify the whole task in that moment. You can do it again at the end. All right, next up are decisions. So decisions are obviously, what did we agree on? And here you want to include the rationale. So when you capture a decision, right, well, if you don't capture a decision, what ends up happening often, and you've probably all experienced this, is you walk out of the meeting and people think different things were decided. It's not 100% clear that we all agreed to the same thing, or even why we agreed to that same thing. And a couple of days later, people are not all aligned, and it becomes a he said, she said game, and that's no fun. People have foggy memories, and there's no shared document. There's nowhere we can go to say, well, actually, this is what we all agreed to. So make sure that you capture exactly what the decision is, and we recommend the rationale, right? You want to know, why is this the decision that we agreed on? This is really helpful for making sure we have shared understanding around the decision, And for people who weren't in the meeting, it helps them understand the decision and how it applies to their work. So they can make sense of that decision. And then lastly, it provides that context for the future. Sometimes things change and you want to revisit a decision. And if you know, well, this decision we made because of budgetary constraints, and then something happens with one of our competitors, well, did that change our budgetary situation? If not, then this decision probably still stands because we didn't make this decision based on a competitor. We made it based on our budgetary limitations. So it helps you revisit decisions and put them into context. So now during the meeting, if you feel like you're spinning around a decision or you're coming to some conclusion, you can use your role, and as note taker, you can say, it sounds like we're coming to some conclusion. Can someone state what the decision is on the table so I can accurately capture it in our notes? Or here's what I heard our decision is. Is that correct? Is that what everyone else understood? So, or you can lay some options on the table. I think maybe we have 3 options, A, B, C. What do we need to do to bring this to a close so that I can capture the decision? So you can use your role to help move the conversation forward and get that decision to be super clear. Same thing with the rationale. After the decision is clear, you can say, can someone state for me what they think, like what the rationale is, why this decision? Or here's what my understanding of why this decision is the one we're going with. Is that correct? So just lay it out there so it can be captured appropriately in your notes. All right, last type of note is learnings, and this is what information needs to be highlighted. So a lot of notes that get taken are just notes, so just context, just things people scratch down. It's not really information that's critical. So learnings are that critical information, big ideas, insights. It's the stuff that goes beyond context to being important information that you want to draw people's attention to and that you as a team want to remember. They might not occur in every meeting, but if they do, you want to make sure that you've captured them and they're part of your team's learning knowledge base. So when you're creating a learning culture, it's helpful to revisit learnings, to have captured them over the course of time and to be able to come back and say, all right, what did we learn over the past 3 months and how does that impact our work? How can we not make the same mistakes twice because we've captured these learnings and we can learn from our own history, because again, it's so easy to forget. So during the meeting, you want to call out learnings just like you're calling out decisions and action items. So you can ask the group, what are the key takeaways from this part of our conversation? Or it sounds like that's really important. I want to make sure I capture it accurately. Can you restate those numbers? Or can you restate that bit of information for me? And ask and help people surface those like really important stuff. If you're not sure if something's a learning, just capture it. It's always better to have it, and then you can discard it later if you don't need it. And a lot of times, again, you can just scratch stuff down. You don't have to like write it all out at once in the meeting. Just capture some ideas and you can revisit them at the end. Another question you can ask is, are there any highlights you want to make sure people who aren't in this meeting are informed of? So think about, if I wasn't in this meeting, what would I still need to know? And surface that to the group. And then of course, acknowledge when good insights are being shared or when past learnings are being applied. You always want to celebrate successes. So make sure that you acknowledge like, oh, that's a great insight. Thank you for sharing that. Let's capture that in our learnings. All right, coming to a close here. Tip number 5 is to end your meeting with a wrap up. So again, this whole thing is about how to lead a meeting without losing your mind. So you've gotten through all of the critical parts of the meeting. You've kept the meeting on track with norms. You've followed your agenda. You've used your roadmap. You've kept people on time. You've captured some scratch notes as you've gone along with some potential next steps and some decisions. Now's the time in the last 5 to 10 minutes to really gain alignment and commitment. So now you capture those notes by hand, and this is something that someone asked earlier that can be hard if you're capturing notes by hand and then you have to go type them up and it feels like extra work. Just do it in the meeting. Use the last 5 to 10 minutes and ask someone, if you're the one who's going to be reporting out, ask someone else if they can grab their computer and type up the notes as you're reviewing them. So you can look at your notes now and say, okay, here's what I captured. I think there's a next step around someone getting some numbers from Bill. And the person who's now typing can type up, get numbers from Bill. And you can say, okay, who's going to do that and by when? And the person just types it up real time in the meeting so that by the end of your wrap up, all of the important notes are already typed up. You don't have to now take more time outside and check in and make sure that they get shared or somebody types them up. So use those last 5 minutes. When you go through and end with a wrap up, you're building your notes together. Right? You're asking the questions, what did we decide today? What are those next steps? Who's going to do what by when? What do we want other people to know? What critical information was shared? Or what insights do we need to share or capture? That's this time to build those together. So even if you haven't taken good notes during the meeting, the pressure's off. Just take those scratch notes and use those to build your notes at the end. And get other people to do that too, right? You're all collectively building notes. You don't have to be the only one. All right, so when you've done all of this, at the end, people will feel like a sense of accomplishment. It'll be really clear what you accomplished in your meeting, what the outcomes you achieved are, what the next steps are, and people can walk away really feeling like the meeting was successful and a good use of their time. And hopefully you walked away feeling like, that wasn't so bad. I didn't have to use any heroics. I just got through this meeting, we got everything done, and we know what we're doing next, and that was a great meeting. So those are the end of the tips. Effective meetings don't happen by accident, they happen by design. This is really true, right? Just as we talked about in the beginning, it's not about heroics, it's about behavior. When you plan out what are our norms, how am I gonna leave this meeting with, I have my agenda, I know what I want to accomplish, and you can be really intentional, your meeting can be successful, and you can lead it with intentionality, and it won't be requiring any kind of craziness. So we're gonna take our last couple minutes and flip over to the Meteor app. I'm gonna show you a couple of cool features that will help you do all these things we just talked about. If you have questions while I'm getting this all set up, please pop them in the chat box. I am happy to answer those as I'm pulling up my other screen. So here we go, share screen. Oh, come out of the way. And let me pull up my chat box again so that I can see it. There we go. All right, quickly about virtual meetings. So basically in a virtual meeting, you want to do everything I just said to like the 10th degree. It's really hard in virtual meetings when not everybody can see everything. So if you have stuff on the wall, it can be complicated because not everyone can see it. So make sure that you're putting as much as you can on the screen or in a shared screen, or you've sent it to people ahead of time so they can follow along and reference the norms and such. And make sure that you have some norms specifically for virtual meetings, which are in our article, and you can see more about that in our blog article. And we have lots of other kinds of articles on virtual meetings that we're happy to share. All right, more questions, let them come in. I'm gonna talk just for a minute about how the Meteor you apply all these great techniques to leading a meeting without losing your mind. So first, this is the agenda page, which I showed you last time. But here I'm just going to point out in the additional details section of the agenda, we have something called norms. So here's where you can type in and add a new norm for your meeting. So we'll call this one new norm. And if you're like, wait, I don't remember norms, or I don't know what norms I should be using, you can click this little question mark icon, and we have a whole thing on norms, which you can say, oh, I like this one. Everyone is responsible for helping to stay on track. Speak up if you feel like we're getting off track. I'm going to add that one. Just copy it, paste it right in here, and you now have your norms. And you can, of course, change the, we're getting off topic. You can just go in there and write over it, make sure it's exactly how you want it to be. So these norms, when you put them here, get sent out with your agenda ahead of time so everybody knows. You can reference them at the beginning of the meeting because they're right here in front of you. The second part is around taking notes. So in Meteor, we help you capture your notes as tasks, decisions, and learnings. These ends are just generic notes. So this is that contextual stuff that you want to capture. Anything that's just for context, anything that's maybe someone's opinion that you want to write down, but it's not really a learning, it's not really super important. You're just kind of capturing some information as you go. So here's an example of a note. Here's a task, and you can see when you mark something as a task, you also get to assign an owner. So you can grab an owner from it, you can give it a due date, and you can keep it organized. So here, this is on our task plan. We put it into the social media online community. but we also automatically create a back burner for you. So if you have topics that need to go into the back burner, you can create a task and give it, assign it to the back burner, so it's also in your notes. The third kind of note is a decision, right? Just like I said before, here's where you capture your decision, and of course, here's where you capture your rationale, so that it's prompting you to say, we made a decision, what's the rationale? You don't have to remember, oh yeah, when I write decisions, I'm also supposed to have a rationale. Our software helps remind you to do that. And then lastly, we have learnings, which are just one big open spot where you can type in what's the learning we captured. And you can create as many notes as you want. So I'm going to make one more learning here just for fun. Another learning. And at the end of the meeting, you can come over here and click summary. And you can see all of your notes by the type of note they are. So when you're doing that recap or that wrap up at the end, you can say, all right, we have one task. So make sure Amy knows she's going to be responsible for this task. Here's our one decision and the rationale, and we had 2 learnings, and this is what these are. And of course, all the notes at the bottom, which you don't really need to review. So this is a way to get a quick snapshot of what you accomplished. And with one click right over here, you can send the summary. You can add it, add other people. So if there are people who should be informed, you can pop them in here and just say like, yeah, I'm gonna include Dorit. Oh, she's not on here. She's not in this particular account, but I saw Dan. Okay, so I'm just gonna include Dan on here, make sure he gets this email because he should be included in the notes. And I'm gonna write like, great meeting everyone, right? And I can send the summary. So that's just a really quick overview of how the Meteor software can help you plan with norms, take effective notes, and clarify those outcomes, and make it super easy to send the meeting notes off as soon as the meeting is done. So if you have any other questions, please let me know. Again, we'd love to hear from all of you. If you're interested in our Thriving Teams program or anything else, please let us know. We'd love to have you as part of in our community even more than you already are now. So I'm gonna stop sharing and turn it over again to Alexandra. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for that. That was such a great session. And thank you so much for the last 3 weeks. The whole webinar series was very, very informative and a lot of really, really good information for us to take back to our teams and make our meetings more effective. So thank you very much. We certainly know who to call and contact with questions on how to have a Thrive. For anyone who's interested in how to a profitable and sustainable business, you can reach us at 844-393-SLAP. You can email us at support@smallbizsilverlining.com. The first, just like last week, the first 2 people who respond to the follow-up email after this webinar will get a free business consultation, 30-minute business consultation phone call. So again, thank you so much for everyone for joining us in the webinar series, whether you were here all 3 times, twice, or today. I'm Alexandra Hill, and we're Silver Lining. Bye, guys.
All right. Bye, everyone.